Buenos Dias Gunners Collective. Back at it? You already know, homie. Like a motherfucking smack addict, right? And as you can tell by today's thumbnail, that one right there. Yes, indeedy, I'm going to write graffiti on the bus. We're going to talk about something a little bit personal to me. In fact, it's a lot of bit personal to me. We're going to talk about the history of my father. My real father, my dad, someone who was in the trenches, someone who was in and out of prison, in and out of the penitentiary, did his thing as a grown man and on grown man status, and is no longer with us today. But at the same time, man, you don't celebrate death, homie. You celebrate life, what he did, how he conquered, how he prospered. And, to each their own. Everyone has their own story. This is my Jefito story. This is my father's story. This is one of the people that was instrumental in me becoming the man I am. Whether it was fucking by doing it or by proxy from a distance. Either way, this is the reason why the gun is like bang bang. In a menudo style in direct fashion, let's get straight to it. So what we're going to talk about is the history. My dad's history. My real dad. I do have a stepfather that I love very much, man. He's my dad, plain and simple, period, man. He's been there through the hard times and the rough times. Hey, where you been? Where were your antennas when I fucking needed diapers, right? But at the same time, I got to show respect and love to my father and the real gangster that he was. Now, of course, that's him on the thumbnail right there, looking all like this, and there ain't no denying it, no doubt about it. It's my dad. So, Trip, I'm going to take it back and I'm going to tell you his story, because it's real gangster. My dad was born in Los Angeles, California, born in LA, raised by my grandmother, she split up with my grandfather. They didn't last too long, and my grandmother raised my dad. Okay, when he was very young, probably about 3 or 4 years old, they moved to the south side of Modesto, right? That's how my family gravitated up north. They moved to Modesto. Of course, I still got familia down in LA, primos and Wilmas. A lot of cousins down there that we go to visit every once in a while. But at the same time, in the meantime, in between time, we're predominantly a family from up north. So my dad moves to Southside Modesto. And as a teenager, of course, he was your typical kid, man, out there doing his thing. Just like everyone else in the early 70s, he was in the mix. You got to understand, about that time, man, the Cholo Stilo was hitting pretty hard. Everybody was into having carros that were very nice, putting a little beat in them. Not necessarily woofers, a couple 6x9s, man. If you should lose me. They were doing big things, right? And, of course, my dad had a 57 Chevy. Very nice in the south side of Modesto. Was well known out there. Kicked it with the hitters from Modesto at that time, Everybody was couples. I remember my mother and my father telling me these stories that my dad wasn't just kicking it with anybody's, right? All his homeboys had old ladies, and of course my mom was with my dad, so they all did the couple thing. And it was all good, They kicked it together, they partied together. They didn't go outside of their circle. This was their circle. Now, whether my dad was claiming norteño or sureño at that time is irrelevant because he wasn't. Okay, this was before them times. Of course, norteños and sureños were established. They were already around doing their thing. But my dad never got caught up in that. He was more into the Cholo Stilo, lowriders. He was a lowrider. So I'll tell you a story about how my father and my mother met. Because this is how far it goes back into history. My dad had a 57 Chevy. And he was cruising. He was cruising. My dad had dropped out of high school. Wasn't really into high school, man. Wasn't his thing. He was out there trying to wiggle and make some money. And my mother is originally from Oakland, California. She had moved to the Central Valle with her aunt and her uncle. And so she was going to a new school in Modesto, And they lived in Grayson, which is Stanislaus County. So people went to school out in Modesto. So, of course, my mom's first day of school, my dad's cruising by. Sees my mom and hit the brakes one time for his mind. Did the tighten up like Archie Bells in the drills and backed up. And it started popping at my mother. Of course, my mother liked his car initially. She liked the music that was coming out of his car. She liked his car. She liked him as a person. They ended up starting to date. And so, a year later, ding dong, the gun is here. The gun is here. I ain't no queer, right? I came through, sliding, dipping, and dashing with a whole lot of energy. They had me. Okay, one of the first stories that my mother told me about being a kid was that my dad at that time sold big Yesca. There was garbage bag. And I remember this. It's kind of weird. Even as a young kid, I flash back to my dad, man, always having garbage bags of Yesca in the house, rolling leños. This guy was so good he could roll a leño with one hand. I just remember these images and these stories. But here's a story. So at that time, my dad was doing a little wheeling and dealing. He was dealing in the black, and he called it hamburger meat. He used to keep it in the refrigerator, the freezer. And this is where he put it. And there was only a couple of his homeboys that knew what time it was, knew what my dad was into. And one thing I could say about my father is he never held a real job. He wasn't someone that I looked at like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be just like him and give me a good job. Now, my dad never had a job. He sold at ramates. He sold at flea markets. He hustled. He did his thing. He laid motherfuckers down. It just was what it was. He was a hustler and a gangster. And we're going to get to all that. But one of the stories that is told to me was I was a newborn baby, and we were living on the west side of Modesto over there by the old Pioneer's Chicken. Whoever's from Modesto, they know what I'm talking about. And my dad was dealing, and he's kicking back in the pad, man. It's the evening time. One of my tios who was younger, probably about 4 or 5, is at the pad. My mom was taking care of him. My mom's cooking in the kitchen. This is back in the days, man, when no one locked their doors. Everyone had a screen door. You had a little hook on it, if anything. But no one tripped. So my dad's watching TV. He's rolling the leño. I'm a little baby. I'm in my bassinet. It is what it is. And a couple of vatos knock at the door. And before my mom could answer it, they come through the door, and they immediately put the cuete on me. And I'm a baby, and they put the cuete on my uncle at the time, who was about 4 or 5 years old. And my dad's sitting there. My mom says, my dad just looked him in the eyes and said, why don't you put the motherfucking gun on me, suckers, right? Why you got to put it on my kids? And of course, these guys are like, hey, we'll kill your kids. We ain't tripping, this, and that, and so forth, right? And my mom's freaking out. To this day, my mom doesn't like, she doesn't leave her doors unlocked or nothing, because this event right here fucking changed her. But of course, my mom's like, put the gun on him, right? Not my babies. And they put the gun to me. It was what it was. Of course, eventually, man, these guys got what they came for, and they took off. And then my dad was right behind them. Called his homeboys. His homeboys came and swooped them up. They were gone, right? Whatever happened, happened. Can't call it like an alcoholic. Let's just say he got back home late that night. And that's what it was. But that was one of my first stories that I remember my mom telling me. And it was a trip, that my dad was into stuff like that. Never to know that I would grow up to be into things pretty much similar. So, my whole life on my dad's side of the family, he was the one. He was in and out of prison my whole life. When I would get a chance to see my dad and affiliate with his side of the family, we were well known out there in Merced, Winton, Atwater, and Livingston. My dad's family, for anyone that knows, the Vidaris are no fucking punks. They're no joke, right? We was out there wiggling. Very well-known family. But at the same time, my dad was like the metal of the family. He ran it with the iron fist. He had everyone shook up. He had a lot of people shook up. And it wasn't things that he had done, because we had heard stories about things my dad had done, and I never questioned him on it. I never asked him about it. I never got in depth like, hey, I heard you were doing this or doing that. He wasn't the type of individual to talk too much and tell you too many things. He was more the type to fucking show you to get down than tell you to get down, right? So I never could say that my dad laced me up and gave me game or nothing, because he wasn't the type to do that. It was kind of a lead by example thing. I have to watch him. Hey, sus, get that. Can you give me the rundown? How about I fucking run your head into the ground? That's the rundown. No, I don't like that. I don't want that rundown. That's a different type of rundown that I'm used to. That's the type of individual he was. A man of very few words, but at the same time, you knew by his actions and the way he carried himself, he wasn't no joke. Now, in the 80s, my dad liked to hang around with a lot of the bikers, a lot of the old school homies from Modesto, and he had a lot of respect. He did a lot of things. Another story I could tell about my jefito was, I remember being at my tia's in Grayson, and my dad staying there, and I was wondering why he wasn't coming to the pad. Like, why does dad got to stay here? And my mom was like, shut the fuck up. And I was like, okay, I know how to do. You know what I mean? But when she left, I'd be talking again, like smoking shit. And I realized when I was older, when I heard the story, my dad had escaped from the road camp. And he was hiding out right there. There used to be a road camp out there on Laird Park. It was called Laird Park out in Modesto. And the park's still there. I don't know what it is now, but at that time it was a road camp, meaning it was like a fucking jail, like the Branch in Sacramento or Sandy Mush in fucking Merced. And kind of a lower minimum, but my dad did it moving. Sass, you know what I mean? So like, Usain Bolt. He was gone. And of course, being in Grayson where my tio lived, that's where he wiggled to, and he was flying under the radar. And my dad was actually on the run for about 15 years. This vato had a good run. I remember every time I was around my dad, he was on the run. It was never legit. Every time we were in a car, he didn't have a license. He just wasn't a positive role model, but he was my dad, and I loved him for the gangster that he was. So I'm going to tell you, fast forward, right? A funny story. So I'm a kid. I'm probably 8 or 9 years old. This is prior to me going to Fred C. Nellis, getting locked up, wiggling. I remember I was with my stepdad, and we were, I just played. I was playing football at that time, and we had won a game, and the coach wanted us to meet him at Pizza Hut. He was gonna buy everybody pizza. Sasuke, be there or be square. I'm gonna be there, Sasuke, and I need me a big old pedazo, right? I need me a big old piece of that pizza. So my stepdad was gonna give me a ride. And I love my stepdad, man, but man, that's what they wanted, right? So we're driving, and I hear that a truck bumping to the beach, y'all, just slapping, right? And I'm like, ooh, that shit's bumping, right? That MC Breed. And I remember looking to the left, and I hadn't seen my dad for about 3 or 4 years. From what I had heard, he was either on the run or locked up again. I can't call it like an alcoholic. This was normal. I would go years without seeing my father, and it wasn't like I was like, oh man, my dad doesn't love me. I wasn't on no fucking petty or funny shit like that. It was more to the point of, he's just doing his thing, man. He's wiggling. It was normal to me. And so I hear that beat, and I remember it was slapping. I look over, and I see a white truck, and I see my dad, and he got his arm out. He had his beanie on, big old brooch. My dad always had a big old whip. As you can see in the thumbnail, he got the long braid, long hair. Just my dad. Looked like a big old 400-pound biker. And I see him bumping, just cruising to the beach, y'all, with a badass bitch in the thing. To the beach, y'all. I'm like, I look, and then I kind of turn around and tell my stepdad, look, this is my dad right there. To this point, my stepdad had only heard stories and seen pictures. He had never seen my dad in real life, right? They're about to do one of these. He's like, where? Right? He's looking forward. Where? I says, right there. Look. He goes like this. Right? I'll never forget, man. We got to motherfucking Pizza Hut quick. Well, quietly as it's kept, my stepdad said, hurry up, get off, get off, get off, get off. So I jump off, whatever, man. My dad happens to go to the same fucking Pizza Hut. Man, I sit down with him, chop it up. He gives me a little $50 bill. I'll never forget that. One of the proudest days of my life, man. I had a 50. I did not act. I was breaking. I want 50. I had a 50, right? Five me. He fived me real quick. He gave 5 to the community, and I was good. Anyways, didn't see him again for a couple years. End up running. I started to get older. I went to YA, and I remember my dad coming to visit me in juvenile hall and calling me a fucking dummy and an idiot for getting caught up in a murder case. But at the same time, he loved me, man. And he wished that things could have been different. But, the wiggle was real. Cool. I understood. See, I'm not one of those petty guys to say, it's all his fault. If he would have been there, right? Then I wouldn't have did this. I wouldn't have did that. I probably would have did that anyways. That was just my mentality. That was the area I was growing up in. I wanted to be a norteño. I wanted to be a gang member. I wanted to be that. I know all my familia didn't want me to go that route, but Sasuke, what you want me to be, a doctor? What you want me to be, a placa? What you want me to be, a lawyer? Sasuke, I could be a crooked lawyer, right? You know what I mean? At the same time, I went the other route, and I became a norteño. And that's what I intended to be, and that's what I was. I got laced up along the line by Tío Pedro Tupacas and my Uncle Joe, and I ran with that. But at the same time, my dad was always instrumental in me having that image, always that image of, man, he's a true gangster. Like I said, man, my dad was caught up in various things that I can't talk about on here, because even though he's no longer with us, it's just quietly not to be said on film, right? It's better left in the cuts, in the family archives. But he was a gangster. He was a gangster. So let's fast forward to the year 2001. I'm incarcerated, man. I'm incarcerated. And don't have really too much communication with my familia because I'm, locked up. And I'm hearing that my dad and my brother actually goes to live with my father, in Modesto. They're staying on the west side of Modesto at this time. Actually, a few houses down from Scott and Lacey Peterson, which was a trip, true story. They lived a few houses down. My dad actually knew that Baboso. I remember talking to him. I was like, whatever happened with that dude? He said he was a knack. He was just a J-cat, right? A regular old J-K. So I'd have kicked him in his ass so quick. But they lived a few houses down. So my dad's living with them, and my brother's living with my father. My brother was very close to my dad's side of the family. I was very close to my dad's side of the family too, but not necessarily as close to my father as my brother was. He was more in his life. My brother wanted to be around his dad, so I was like, I want to be with my dad. Well, get the fuck on, my mom told him. Do a pushing and give me that burrito de fucking chorizo con papas. You ain't got that out the door either, right? And so he pushed, which was cool. That, that was good. And so my dad fucking was lacing him up. But you got to understand, my dad didn't have that father instinct of like, yeah, hey, I'm going to be a good father to you. He was a good man, but at the same time, he was a crooked motherfucker, right? This hustle. He seen my brother as an opportunity as a crime partner. Vato. Let's make it. And, 2001 hits, And for no other reason, they come up on this lick and they decide they're going to go hit this guy for 30,000 ecstasy pills or whatever the case may be. That's the story. You know what I mean? I'm just telling it. I don't know if it's true or not. But they head out, man. And this is what my brother's incarcerated for, doing 27 years. He's been down 21 now. They actually go out to the country, man. And they hit this house, lay some people down, supposedly, we're going to say allegedly, you know what I mean? My brother got board dates. So we're going to say allegedly. At the same time, they catch all these cases, and they caught my dad, man. He had a clown mask on. They all fled down here. He was looking like motherfucking Pennywise in the car, trying to be the getaway driver, and he gets caught up. Now, my dad being a fucking smart criminal that he was, Sasuke, a smart criminal, right? Being the smart criminal that he was, when the placas started chasing him, of course, they wreck in the field. My brother goes that way, Sasuke. The Africanos that were with him, they go that way. And then my dad says, fuck all you guys. I'm going to do it moving this way. He actually went out with the field workers and started picking tomates like he was part of the field workers, threw a hat on, says, get the paño around his face and blended in. Clown mask not included, right? And got away for about 2 hours. Placas didn't know where he was because he blended in smooth. I don't know how he did. The pipes were only like 4'7". They're about this like 6'4". But at the same time, and he did that, he was actually on the truck doing one of these in the cuts, right, trying to get away. When the placas snatched him up, they found him. They said, there's the clown right there. He's like, homie, don't play that. And my dad ended up getting 12 years. He got 12 years out of the situation, goes and sits down in the county jail and does whatever time he has to do, ends up going to prison. Funny thing is, I was in prison at the same time, and I remember them almost putting us on the same yard, but I just missed my father, right? I just missed him. He was, at that time, considered an active norteño. Not necessarily because he was from a barrio or he banged north there, not, but he was an old school veterano homes that was still in good standings as far as it was with the homeboys. They placed him on an active norteño block and he functioned, and that was my father's mentality, a functioning mentality. It wasn't that he was dedicated to the north there. He was dedicated to a cause. He was dedicated to a fucking self, straight up dedicated to that bolsita, dedicated to getting that next fucking dollar. That's what he was dedicated to. But at the same time, he had that old school mentality of, I'm GP, I'm mainline. I'm going to fucking rock wherever they send me and whoever they send me with. They happened to, because my brother was an active norteño at that time, they actually put them together, being crime partners on the block in Merced County Jail, and my dad wiggled. Okay, eventually, because they were crime partners, they ended up splitting them up and trying them separately, and it was what it was. My dad took a deal. My brother fought the case. My brother was the shooter, they say, allegedly, right? So he got a little more time. My dad picked up 12. Funny thing is, though, like I said, I was incarcerated at the time. All this was going down. So I started to get familiar with their case, what was going on. I seen the whole discovery. I knew who told, who didn't. And it was what it was. Me and my dad missed each other just by fucking days. It seems like they didn't want to put us together because, now it's like this and like that and like that. And I would, now they're in trouble, right? It would have been on some fucking G-Thing shit. But that's what it was. I always respected my father. Like I said, wasn't in my life necessarily as much as you would hope a father would be. Didn't lace me up in the game. I can't say it's all because of him. You know what I mean? He did it like that. No, it was nothing like that. But respect is to be given to one's parents no matter what. Because I understood. As I got older and I started to have children, I understood, man, you can't always be the perfect father. You could try to be the best you can be. You could try to give your kids more than you got. But at the same time, man, not everybody's perfect. Sasuke? And you got to recognize that. And a real one recognizes a real one. So my dad was definitely a real one and played a big impact into my life to say, I don't want to be like him when I grow up. See, I want to get a Harley. I want my kids to have the new Nintendo Switch. I want my kids to have this. I remember my mother struggled a lot with 4 kids, with me, my brother, my 2 sisters, and my father not being there, not because he didn't want to be there, but because he was incarcerated all the time and couldn't be there. I remember going to visit him in Tehachapi prison, where my brother was conceived. I remember going to visit him in Vacaville, you know what I mean? So I don't know what the fuck he was doing there. Está fucking my dad, man. What are you doing here, right? This was back in the days when it was still solid. I remember going to visit my dad in DVI, waiting in the car with my tia while my mom went in there to visit him. My mom was always faithful and dedicated and always stood by my dad's side. Stay in my corner. I remember he used to shoot the cards, man, would stay in my corner on him and all that shit. My mom used to say, oh yeah, look, nice card. You know what I mean? This is just part of life. It's part of life as a prison wife. My dad doing his time, and as a kid, seeing it from the outside, looking in, utterly yay, watching what was going on. But I always respected my dad for the man he was, and for the fear he instilled and people around him. Motherfuckers knew not to fuck with my dad, man. He'll fuck your whole life off. He was a big, gigantic, he was probably about 350, almost 400 pounds, 6 foot whatever, and will knock your whole kneecap backwards, right? He was not playing. Like I said, the type of, the way he wiggled, the way he carried himself, the type of man he wasn't someone to be played with. He was very old school, very quiet, very with the business, you know? So that pretty much is the history of my dad and how I came to be. Sasuke had me. There it is. I donated. You're born. Sasuke, you're on your own, motherfucker, right? And it was what it was. But I will always respect the man for his gangster, right? I don't respect the man for being a good father. I respect the man for making me the man I am today, playing his intricate part into my puzzle, for which my life is not over yet. We'll see where it goes, right? I hope to believe that he was proud of me in some form or fashion when he passed. At the same time, I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't call him like an alcoholic. He's gone now. You know what I mean? But his memory will live on through me and through videos like this. And it is what it is. At the end of the day, man, I hope that you go out there and you hustle for your familia. If you're a father, man, be a good father to your children. They're going to remember one day. They're going to reflect out together. They're going to make a YouTube video. My dad was a fucking baboso. You don't want that. You know what I mean? Go out there and get it for your familia, man. Remember hustling. The mentality of the raza is to all come together. Unite this shit black and brown. You already know what it is. The gun. That's on a personal tip. Bang, bang. Hope you like the story.